Hey Restorers, welcome to a very exciting episode of the Restoration Today podcast. Those of you who know me know that I love helping people share news, especially big news, and today's episode is a big one, big news with people that are very familiar faces in the industry. So I am excited to have Chuck Violand and Tim Hull with Violand Management Associates here. And there is kind of a leadership transition going on here in the beginning of 2025. So that is what we're here to talk about. So I don't know. We didn't talk about how we're teasing this out and who gets to say what the news is. So, Chuck, go ahead. I'm going to let you start by sharing the news, and then we're going to kind of go through the stories, and I have a bunch of questions. But what is the news?
Well, the news is that we're transitioning ownership of Violand Management from me to Tim Hull.
Beautiful. Well, congratulations to you too. I know that this has been something that's been evolving for a while, and I'm sure that it has been a very interesting experience from both sides. And I'm excited to kind of learn more about that and have you guys share your journeys with the industry. So, Chuck, I'm going to stick with you. Share a little bit about your background in the evolution of Violand. I mean, when people think about consulting in the restoration industry, Violand Management Associates is the name that everybody says first. Sorry to everybody else who is listening to this, but it's a true statement. So congratulations to you for the legacy that you have built and the business that you created. So talk a little bit about the evolution of Violand.
Well, thank you very much for the kind words, Michelle. I really appreciate it. And Tim, it appears that our marketing worked it out, so it has. Well, I started it 37 years ago as a solo operator, and I did consulting myself with Violand Management for 20 years. And then, my kids were growing up, they were moving out, they didn't need dad to drive them around or to coach their teams. So I thought, you know what, I felt that it's time to do what I thought the company could be doing, should be doing, what I should be doing with my life. And so I decided to expand the practice and started bringing people on board. Scott Tackett, as you know, was first consultant. Tim was the second consultant that I hired. And it was just a progression after that, until we got to the point where we are. In a million years, I would not have pictured this, but I certainly am pleased with the picture.
Yes, I'm sure. Do you have any idea how many companies you've worked with or your team has worked with over 37 years?
That's a great question, Michelle. I don't have an actual count.
But
I don't think it's 1,000, but it's certainly several hundreds.
yes.
So yeah.
I would think so.
Yeah.
Okay, so Tim, share a little bit about your journey. You were the second consultant at Violand, but you've been in the industry for a while, even prior to joining the team there. So share your background.
Yeah, so I kind of grew up in the trades, Michelle, as you all know, and had the privilege of being a part of two very reputable restorers early on in my career. And at some point along the way, I met Chuck at a leadership conference in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
By chance, we sat down next to each other as we are now.
Yeah, very similar.
Yeah, and I think I'm still your right-hand man at this point, right? But we joke about that the stars kind of all lined up, and at that stage in my career, I was doing a lot of traveling work in catastrophe type situations, and had a very young family. My two girls were just tiny at the time, and the travel was getting hard on the home life. And I remembered meeting Chuck and being impressed by the conversations that we had, and I called him up one day and said, "Hey, you looking for some help?" And there was this long, awkward silence for an extended period of time. And I said, "Chuck, are you still there?" He said, "Yeah, I was just looking out the window." And I said, "Wow, I'm glad I got your attention." But he said, "I was looking to see if the moon and the stars and everything
exactly
lined
what I
up."
was thinking.
So I guess that's kind of how we met and how we got started. And he was very gracious to take a chance on me at a very young age. And as soon as I came in, I kind of fell in love with what we were doing, and enjoying see other people have success in the business and helping them along the way. So that's how I started at Violand Management, and worked with several of Chuck's clients early in the days. And I still think they might have questioned your hiring decision, but But I was fortunate enough to pay attention over the years and learn from some of the mistakes that were made early. But then really kind of embrace what we were doing and take a look at the bigger picture. And I think the vision that we've had for the organization has always been alignment.
Mhm.
And we were able to put a succession plan in place, which fortunately made sense for the two of us. But more importantly, I think ensures the longevity of Violand moving forward.
I think not only the vision of where we're going with the company, because I think that's evolved over time, but I think the values, your personal values, my personal values, while we didn't know each other prior to those meetings, when we got to know each other, there was just that underlying sense that there were a lot of shared values.
Absolutely.
And I think we just became more and more familiar with that as we got to know each other.
Yeah.
Chuck, how early on did you have an exit strategy? Did you know many years ago that this is kind of how you plan to maybe go into retirement? Did you know you would sell when? And then you just mentioned a succession plan. How long ago did like that succession plan itself, this specific way, kind of start coming into view?
She used the R word, Chuck.
I don't know if you're actually retiring or not, so we'll have to get to that later in the
We'll
podcast.
get to that. Yeah.
He could be Tom Klein, who retired, I think, at my first summit and is still working.
He
So
is still working. Matter of fact, he's been working with us longer than he's been retired.
True.
So, I mean, he's been retired working for us longer than when he was an employee, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
So there's a couple questions there, Michelle. The first one, did I picture it like this? I didn't. I suppose that's not the right answer. I should say, oh, absolutely. This was the vision we wanted to live out, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
No, I didn't. Not at all. But this is much better than I could have imagined at the time. Now, the other part of that question, I believe, was when did we start thinking about it?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if you remember, but the first time I remember any hint that you were interested in owning the business and leading it was down at Key Lime Bistro on
Oh.
and I've got a picture of it of that very time. And Hope was there, and she might have been pregnant with Easton, but Laurel and Greta were both in the picture, and we're having dinner. And I had at the time, my youngest son was like in college. And so Tim goes, I forget exactly what led to it, but you said something like, so the future of the business is Moose. His nickname was Moose. Moose, Tim. Moose, Tim. So I have to decide which one it's going to be. But I thought that was hilarious when you did that. So that happened. And then several years ago, shortly after you were here, we deliberately decided that we need to separate Chuck Violand from Violand Management in terms of positioning. And we worked very hard at that. And that's one of the reasons that all of the consultants write, we all present, is to create that separation. I think in many ways we've achieved that. I know that there are many clients that we have now who really don't know me. I've never really spoken to them in advance of them coming on board. So I think that part succeeded. I think the final step, I mean, it's always been a progression, Michelle, as you might imagine, but I think the final step was 3 years ago at Honey Run when it became more formalized with you moving into the general manager's position and promoting a couple, John and Scott. And I think the handwriting that was on the wall became very clear at that point that this was what was going on.
Very good. Very good. So Tim, what about you? So Chuck just brought up Key Lime Bistro. So great spot. We all miss going to Captiva.
Yeah.
Yes. What for you how early on did you know when you joined maybe the Violand team that maybe this was where you were going? Maybe there wasn't another like job after this. This was the rest of your career, maybe ahead of you.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, let me ask you, so are you referring to owning the company or just being a career at Violand Management?
I guess both. Like could you see early on, oh yeah, this is probably it for me? And then at what point did your mind start to see, oh, maybe there's another possibility here, even beyond being an employee?
Yeah, actually, so looking at it from, I don't want to call it last step in your career, I think happened pretty early on for me. After the first couple of years, it's still to this day, I love working, I mean, maybe to a fault sometimes, but what we do is it's so enjoyable, and it's fulfilling, at the end of the day. So I wanted to have that feeling so I could see myself doing what I was doing for the rest of my career. I didn't really, look too much beyond that. But as far as the ownership thing, all joking aside with the Moose and Tim aspect of it, I think I would say probably within the last 10 years, and now I've been with, with Violand Management for 16 years now, but I'd say within the last 10 years, to me, it started to hit me as though we kind of really needed to figure this out
Mhm.
because Chuck couldn't be around forever. And he deserves to go be a granddad and,
Mhm.
enjoy life and do the things that he can in his days. So for me, it was really about how can we make this work? Not if, but maybe how can we work this out? So the decision I think was made for me pretty early on, as to what the outcome wanted to be. I wanted it to be.
Okay. All right. So, I'm curious. Okay, this is more of a business sided question, but you both have worked with a lot of clients, I'm sure, who have bought and sold businesses, and you've sat on the seat, the consultant seat, and now you've both sat in buyer seller seats individually. So that has to be a completely different experience. So, Chuck, I'm going to toss it to you first. What are some kind of lessons that you're going to take away from this? Like, how different was it sitting in the seller's seat yourself? And we talked about this a little bit offline. This is a little bit different than a lot of transactions that happen where you two have worked together many years and know each other very well, know each other's families. There's a huge background here, which is a lot different than a lot of the transactions that happen. But what was it like sitting in the seller's seat and kind of going through all this?
Again, another great question, Michelle. I think there's a couple different levels to that question. The first one is in terms of how we went through this thing. Again, having that 16-year history working together. But it's one thing to work together with somebody and you just sort of work together. It's another thing to gain an affection for somebody.
Yeah.
And I'll say that unabashedly. Tim and I trust each other. Tim and I love each other. And so I think that lends a different atmosphere to what you're going through. It isn't just business. These are relationships. As a matter of fact, when we went into this whole process, one of the ground rules was, but however it turns out, we're going to end up friends. Okay, so everything was filtered through that. And I can say that happened, that we achieved that. So, but as far as sitting in the seat, going through it, odd. The stakes are a little bit higher when it's your own business.
Yep.
So, I mean, but I will tell you that I had enormous support from my wife, from the staff here at VMA, from Tim, as we went through this. And that's a huge help when you don't have to do that on your own or try to figure it out on your own. He had great legal counsel. I had great legal counsel. But at the end of the day, it was two human beings who made the thing happen. I don't know if that helped or not. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, it did. It did. It's, I sometimes think of that phrase, it's not personal, it's business, but there are times when it's also personal. And that's
It's always personal.
It's always
It's
I
always
don't
personal.
subscribe to that saying.
I don't either. I've had things happen in my life as well where I'm like, that was personal. Anyway, that was personal. All right.
You can try to paint that a different color, but it ain't going away.
No. Okay, Tim, what about you? What was it like actually being in the buyer seat, the acquirer seat in this transaction?
Yeah, and look, I mean, I want to echo Chuck's comment about, the love and the caring and the previous relationship that we've had. And that is truly what I think for me has made this different, because I've been fortunate to be a part of a lot of transactions, especially in recent years, in coaching our clients through the negotiation of the sale. I never really got into the whole valuation and due diligence side of things per se, but I was always coaching with our clients, and I've been on the buy, sell, and the sell side of that scenario. But this was definitely different. Probably in some cases, coming from us, it's going to be do as I say, not as I do. Because we probably broke a lot of the rules that we would advise clients otherwise.
Yeah.
Okay.
But that was necessary. And going back to Chuck's earlier comment about the relationship, if anybody's seen negotiation seminars that I've done, I talk about the things that you're negotiating and the relationship with the person that you have that you're negotiating with. And it's a lot easier, I think, honestly, with a buyer and a seller that are unknown, because you don't have a relationship. But you're always struggling with, what do I value more, the relationship or the things? And in our case, we made it very clear from the very beginning that it was the relationship and the longevity of VMA, the legacy that the organization was going to have to survive, that was the important thing here. Otherwise, the rest of it was, insignificant.
That was actually, Tim, that was a huge criteria in the other people that were approaching me about buying. Was the legacy and being able to carry it on. And look, there's nobody more qualified to carry on the legacy of this place than Tim. So that was a huge variable in there.
Yeah. But to the support side of things, Michelle, I think what one of the big things that enabled us to get through that is the support that we had. So I have to credit our staff first and foremost for their support, because without them, this wouldn't have been possible at all.
Right.
We were very transparent with them throughout the entire process, which I believe was appreciated by them. Or at least that's what we've been told. And in some ways, maybe created a little bit more pressure on us because that stuff was out there and it was visible. But at home, I mean, Karen's been a rock for this organization since she was employee one.
Yep.
And my wife, she is as patient as they come with some of the ideas that I've had in my life, and we've been talking about it personally since I started thinking about it a long time ago. And it was, hey, when's this going to happen? When's this going to happen? But she never faltered in her support for me. So I got to give her a lot of credit too.
But, I'm going to go to Tim's comment about transparency and both of our efforts to be transparent with everybody here in the company. And Tim and I, through the whole process, we thought we were being right up front. Look, here's what we're doing. There's nothing behind the curtain. This is what we're doing. Here's where we are. And yet we would laugh. Okay, when we get a question from somebody in the company about, well, it would be nice to know what's going on. You know what's going on. We've shared everything that's going on. There's nothing more. So I mean, it was just we did our best to try to be as candid and as transparent as we could. But people are always going to have concerns because they've heard the stories about how these things fall apart. And we're very fortunate, extremely fortunate, that ours has not.
Maybe they were trying to tell us we missed something.
Well, and then, there's always that in the back of their mind, isn't it?
Probably.
What about this detail? What about that? Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, without talking numbers, I do have to ask, how was it different coming up with a valuation of a business that is so heavily tied to the owner and the name? I know that there's been work over the last several years to, Chuck, to make it more about the entire team, which it certainly is. But I do think it is different than maybe a local restoration company that's maybe known in their community versus you're a national, also, well, global actually, because Australia and probably some in Canada. It's a global name at this point, and very heavily tied to the owner. So does that affect valuation? I'm just curious.
We are global. Did we sign the papers yet? Thanks, Michelle.
I'm here for you, Chuck.
You have to ask, look, a little shout out to JT Cry, okay?
Yeah.
JT was the one who valued the business. Both Tim and I know JT, we trust JT, we refer clients to him. And so, he was the one who did the valuation on the business. Is it valued the same way that a restoration company is valued? No, it wasn't. They're not. Consulting companies aren't valued the same way.
Yep.
Did my name factor into it? Yeah, but just moderately, really, simply because of the work that we've done over the years, everybody here, in separating what I do from who we are.
Yeah.
And so that I'm not sure that it really affected it all that much. JT would have a far better idea of that than I would. But regardless, the number that he came up with, we both agreed to it. We felt that it was fair. We trusted his judgment. So we went with it.
What would you two say? Because you're both, because you've walked through acquisitions, mergers, all these things with other restoration companies, you still chose to bring in experts, attorneys, JT, other people in the industry. So what kind of advice would you give other people who, because sometimes people do think, oh, I can go this alone. I can figure it out myself. I'll YouTube it, or I don't know. But also, was there some value in bringing in industry specific people like JT, who he's beyond just a broker, like he specifically understands the industry? Was there some value in that as well? Tim, maybe you want to tackle that one.
Well, I mean, speaking to a professional services firm owner now, I'd say spend as much money on your advisors as you possibly can.
I
There you
second.
There you go.
But at the end of the day, in all seriousness, though, I think the professionals that we engaged in this endeavor um, helped us maintain that priority that we had of the relationship and the longevity for VMA as being the top priority. It allows us to separate ourselves from some of the work and allow us to rely on the opinions of third parties and reach some common ground on issues that may have been a source of contention during that negotiation. So for us, that money's well spent.
Oh, yeah.
And I would say the same for anybody else that's selling or buying a business. You want to surround yourself with good counsel and good advice. And ideally, that money should come back to you in spades, without a doubt.
I think that, to that point, the counsel that we hired, I think on both sides, I can speak for my side, but I think on both sides, they were high-powered guys. Okay, they were experts in mergers and acquisitions, and there were times when we had to pull them back and say, "Look, I understand what you're doing here, but understand who we are, okay, in this process. And this is not just another name coming in here and buying this company. It's somebody I've worked with for 16 years, somebody I care for, and so." Sometimes you just have to remind them that while the way you're behaving might be how you behave when it's just a transaction, this is more than just a transaction.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things to note there too, Chuck, I'm gonna put my consultant hat on for a moment, if you don't mind, Michelle.
Go ahead.
Being on the other side of these transactions and seeing how they have played out in business, especially in recent years, we see companies paying top dollar for a business, and then 6, 9, 12 months later starting to reel back on the spending side of things because they have a different end in mind. They're looking at either reselling the thing, making it part of a portfolio that they can eventually make a profit on, or hold it and hope to gain some efficiency. Our goal throughout this whole transaction was, again, legacy and longevity of the organization. So we took great care to talk through elements of the succession that have an impact on decisions that would be made post-sale. And that was done with the intention to make sure that it works. Just because you sell a business doesn't mean it's going to work. So our thought was down the road, not just at the immediate transaction.
Okay, well, that's a perfect segue into my next question, which Tim, I was going to gear toward you first. What is your vision for the future now that you are the owner of Violand Management Associates? I know that you share same vision and purpose and value and all of those things. So now that you're looking at the next however many years you're running it, what's your vision?
Yeah, I mean, my vision has always been the same as Chuck's, and that's to be the leading authority in small business growth. And we've been committed to that for a very long time, and we're going to be committed to that again in the future. I my vision, if you want to talk about the roots of where that came from, really go back to the first summit. If you remember my first summit with you, we were over at Kent State, and just seeing everything that plays out around you, and you've been to that event several times, Michelle. There's a certain level of professionalism and energy that you get out of attending that event.
Yep.
And when I experienced it for the first time, I remember pulling Chuck aside afterwards, and I say, Chuck, I can see this thing having hundreds of people and all this stuff going on because it's such a great event for small business owners. And I think to me that's really what sparked the hunger in hey, we got to keep this thing going. We've got to set our sights on something much larger than just a couple of guys with gray hair sitting around a conference room table.
Yeah.
So here we are today.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, the future has always been crystal clear for me, Michelle.
It's good. Okay. Well, Chuck, what's next for you? Are you and Karen riding off into the sunset with your grandchildren? What are you doing? Is this a slow move? What's happening? What's your plan?
Well, there's really no riding off for Chuck. That's the only writing off. I'm going to Florida for a couple events we're doing. So
Perfect.
I'm still involved in the business. Tim has asked me to stick around, and I've gladly said, yes, I will. My role will change, and as will my wife's. As you know, my wife, Karen, has been fully employed by this company for, I don't know how many years, a whole lot of years since she left Roadway, but she's still an integral part of it. But I think what we're looking at, my particular role here at the company will be to continue to write, present, represent the company at events. So Tim has very graciously asked me to continue to do that.
Graciously. It's my privilege. Look, I mean, anytime you have the opportunity to work side by side with somebody that's built anything really over 37 years, and you have the opportunity to have them stick around, you pay attention. So it's my privilege.
Thank you.
Well, anything else that either of you want to share before we wrap it up? No?
Yeah, I think that Tim hit some really great points when you're talking about, if you're looking at your listeners, your viewers, as they're contemplating going through this process, get great counsel. I mean, don't cheap on that. It will save you money long term. It's going to cost you, but it will save you money long term. Be candid, be transparent when you can. We were very fortunate with the group that we've built here that we could be transparent. And so it was a huge help in us.
Yeah, and I would second that by saying, don't be afraid of the hard work.
No.
What we did took years, from concept to completion, and that requires some commitment. But you can't take shortcuts, not in something that has that degree of importance with you. So don't be afraid of the hard work.
100%. Well, congratulations to you both. Tim, congratulations on being the new owner. Chuck, congratulations on the amazing company that you built and the legacy that you're leaving. I look forward to seeing both of you still at many shows and events in the future and being at other Violand events. I always enjoy hanging out with your team and all of your clients. And many people who know me know that I give Violand a lot of credit for, I think, a lot of the relationships in the industry I've made have come through Violand events and meeting Violand clients, and Jeff Jones dragging me through trade show floors early on in my restoration career to introduce me to people. So thank you so much for all that both of you and your team do for the industry, and congratulations.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Michelle.
Appreciate it.
For more Restoration Today and the latest news, visit our website, cnrmagazine.com, and find the latest episodes of the Restoration Today podcast on your favorite podcasting platform.